Okay, so we're going to move on to module 3. So this is plant biology and pests. So this is going to help you with your care of plants in the system. So normally when we're looking at managing plants, we look at something like an integrated pest management plan. So this is where we are consistently looking for different things that would factor in on our systems. So we're checking mainly for damage from insects. Some of your pests could actually be removed manually. So basically you guys will be monitoring all the time, looking for things like caterpillars, aphids, mildews, and then you guys would know what you need to actually use to combat these pests. You also will have different parts of your plan. So the first part is usually inspecting, trying to find out what is on your system, what is giving you the trouble. Okay, then you've identified the pest, and that will allow you now to identify what you're going to do, whether you're going to treat for the pest or whether you're going to allow that damage to continue. So basically with integrated pest management, you might have some crops that you say, okay, well, they're a loss, we're just going to take them out of the system, and you will have some crops that you're going to treat because you can save them, okay? But part of integrated pest management is trying to not have these problems occur again, okay? So if you know that you're always having a problem with caterpillars and your system is an open system, you might make a plan where you're actually going to cover your system with shade netting. If your issue is aphids because they're coming into your greenhouse, you might have to have a management plan where you spray to control those aphids before they get out of hand. Okay, so basically when we start looking at taking care of our plants, we're going to come up with an integrated pest management plan suited directly for our systems. Okay, because each of you are going to have different components happening. We also have things called biological controls. So biological controls are other beneficial insects or plants that will also help you to control pests on your system. So we're going to go into this a little bit more in detail. Okay, so usually when we're looking at pest control and disease control, most of us are going to try our hardest to limit anything that is toxic, okay, because while you guys are a hydroponic system, you don't necessarily have fish and bacteria in your system like an aquaponic system. You could technically spray your system with any form of pesticide that you choose. However, we know that that is not generally healthy for a hydroponic system or any sort of farming system. So the general trend is to try to limit the use of toxic pesticides, okay? But you will have to have pest control on any sort of farming system. So just because you guys are trying to be more healthy or even trying to go down the road of being organic or sustainable, there will still be some element of pest control, okay? So integrated pest management will basically allow you to pick the best control that will give you the best yield result while still being healthy for the consumer. Okay, so the way that we would set up our pest management plan, as I said, the first step is knowledge. Okay, you have to figure out what is going on. Okay, what are the pests that are coming to your system? What might be attacking one school is not going to be attacking another one. Okay, so just because your neighbor is complaining about one pest does not mean that you're going to have the same thing. Okay, so your step one is to identify what is your problem. Okay, then your step two is to look at how you could prevent this problem from occurring. Is it a situation of where you put the system? If you have weeds and other plants around it that are adding to the problem, whether you're not cleaning your system properly, you don't have those management things in place. So step two is trying to evaluate how you can prevent this from happening. Step three is obviously observing how your treatment has worked. Okay, if you decided to cut down the weeds around your system and put down a weed mat instead, so that there's no shrubs around your system, it's nice and clean, has this helped reduce your pests? Okay, and then obviously any other interventions that you might do, whether it is adding in a biological control, another insect that may become and assist you, or whether you're going to be spraying with a chemical. Okay, and then the last part of it is obviously evaluating everything that you've done so far and kind of going right back around to step one. Okay, so integrated pest management is basically a learning tool. Okay, how you can continuously improve every single time that you put a harvest into your system. A lot of this is going to be record keeping and making sure that you have an idea of what's happened every time you have planted, so that the next time you come back again, you're going to do better. Okay, so under this, we also have what I said before, tolerance, an acceptable level of pests, because a lot of people tend to strive for 100%. We have to have 100% of the system working. But it's highly unlikely in the real world that you're going to have a situation where there are no pests at all. Okay, so most hydroponic systems, we aim for about 80% of the plants are going to succeed and be pest-free. Okay, that is a good guideline to say that you're doing well. So basically, if you planted 100 plants, you would expect at least 80 to make it. And if you lost 20 plants to pests, that is okay. Okay, but also you may have different tolerance levels for the type of plants that you are growing. So if I am growing a whole head of lettuce to a supermarket, they will want the whole head to look good. So I'm not allowed to have much damage on that head of lettuce. Whereas if I was doing mixed leaves, if half of the lettuce had a few caterpillar bites on it, I could discard those leaves and pack the other half of the lettuce into a spring mix bag, okay? So it depends on also where your produce is heading, what is the tolerance of pest control you can have. So for example, if you're doing basil, if you're doing it for placing it on top of a pizza, that's what the customer is using it for, they're gonna want all the leaves to look nice. If you are doing it for pesto, where it's gonna be ground up, if you know that customer got maybe 1 or 2 leaves that were a little bit brown or had a caterpillar bite on it, they're not going to panic as much because they know that they're blending their leaves, okay? So when we're looking at tolerance control, the first thing to decide is, where is my produce going to? What does it have to look at, okay? So obviously if you're a home garden or a school, you could handle more cosmetic damage, whereas if you're selling to a supermarket, they're going to want it to have a certain standard, okay? Second thing is, are you able to control your pests effectively? Okay, so that's part of your management plan, or will you need more time? Okay, so therefore, if you're trying to plant certain things, you have to do certain steps before you plant. Also, what stages are your plants growing at? Obviously, if you got an infestation or a problem when you have seedlings, that is a little bit more damaging. Seedlings are not as hardy as bigger plants and may not bounce back. So you may have a complete loss of your planted system, so you may have to replant, okay? As well as looking at whether the plants have already been stressed, okay? So obviously, if you have a plant that's growing well and is well established, it is going to tolerate the pests better than a plant that is already stressed out and struggling. Okay, so a lot of disease outbreaks happen because your plant isn't doing well. So your hydroponic system, if you haven't put the right nutrients in, you're going to have issues where your crops are struggling, they're already deficient in many things, and then they're going to be more susceptible to pests. Okay, so first step of integrated pest management, I said, is knowledge, trying to figure out what it is that is attacking your plants. And for a lot of you guys, this is going to be new, because you guys have not gone into hydroponics before. So I've already had people calling and saying there's something on the plants. Okay, so the first thing is trying to figure out what that something is, what type of organism it is, because usually the treatment or the spray is directly related to the organism. Okay, so one will work on one thing and will not work on another. Also, just because you think that there's damage on a plant, you think it's a pest, it may not actually be a physical pest. It might be something from the environment. It could be something like air, it could be temperature, it could be even children, because you have a lot of students on these schools. They might be touching and rubbing the leaves. They might be pinching the leaves. Okay, so your damage may actually not be from an insect pest. Okay, and then you also may find that some things may be difficult for you to know because of your knowledge. You may actually have to reach out to a plant specialist, someone that could actually identify whether this is a disease, whether it's a physical insect pest, or whether it's an environmental problem. So that's our first step, trying to identify what our problem is. So to give you guys some ideas of what you all will be looking for, obviously, the most common type of damage we see is actually by insect feeding, the most common one being caterpillars, okay? So the damage will be determined by the crop, the type of stage it's at, the size and stage of the pest, and the type of mouth part that the pest has. Okay, so we have two types of insects that usually one will be either a chewing insect, so it will chew the leaf, and that's usually very identifiable by holes in your leaves. And then we have the other ones that will be the sucking insects, which basically attach to the side of the leaves and then pull the nutrients out, but they never actually cut away the leaf. So you find them kind of stuck on at the back, things like aphids, or you'll see leaf miners going through your leaf, okay? So to give you some examples, this is surveying. So basically, how do you guys check for your pest damage? You have to survey, okay? The pest is not gonna come and tell you that it's there. You have to look for it. Things like caterpillars will be easier to see, okay? But things like aphids, they're very tiny yellow dots, and they're usually on the underside of your leaf. So you have to actually look around your plant, turn the leaves, check the stems, to really pay attention to where you might have pests or diseases hiding. Always, of course, keep your notes and your records, okay, because this will help you to understand your pest cycles. There might be certain times of the year when you get certain pests, and there may be certain times of the year when you get issues with mildew and bacteria. Those would be kind of like during the rainy season, when you have a lot more humidity in the air, you tend to have a lot of outbreaks of mildews and funguses. Okay? So having your records and your notes and your regular monitoring will let us get a record for your system. So you will learn what to expect. And of course, I keep stressing this, the best pest control is actually going to be you. If you're not out on your farm looking for pests, you cannot control them, okay? So basically you have to check regularly, and the sooner that you see the problems, the easier it is going to be to fix them. I'm just going to give you a few examples so you guys can know what to look for. As I said, be friends with Google. These are the same pests that are going to be attacking any plant in the world, whether it's grown hydroponics or grown in soil, okay? So usually the same pest identification tables and things online will work for hydroponics. Powdery mildew is a common one that we get in hydroponics because of the amount of water. We get a lot of mildews and funguses. And then another one we always get is aphids. These are little sucking insects that go on the underside of the leaf. They're little yellow dots. You can either find them by lifting up the leaf, or I find too that sometimes you can look for ants. So ants are attracted to the sap that the aphids release. So if you see a lot of ants running around your system, going into your plants, they are most likely being attracted to the aphids. There's another common one that people see all the time, the leaf miner. You normally see the little trail that it makes as it goes through the leaf. Obviously, the sooner that you catch this, the better. So when the line is really, really short, most likely the leaf miner is still in the leaf, and you can pull off the leaf and get rid of that pest. But if you've let it go to this stage, he's probably already left the leaf and has moved on. So pulling off this leaf is not going to catch the pest. Everybody's favorite, the caterpillar. So these are also very easy to see, but a lot of times, as I said, they're under the leaves, and they even go down into the net pots of the hydroponic system and kind of sleep there. So you tend to see them more on morning and evening when it's cooler and when they come out to feed. Okay, so looking at some of the ways that we can control these pests. So one of the most common ways is a mechanical control. So if you have like flying insects, if you have things like moths and butterflies flying around, you can put up things like the sticky paper, bug lights. Okay, the only problem with these is that obviously they may actually draw other insects to your farm, so be careful with using the lights. But if you're having a problem with flying insects, these are usually good solutions. Biological controls, these tend to work better for those of you that have greenhouses. You can either find the bugs in the wild, I guess in the US and stuff too, you can actually order them. But in my case, if I find ladybugs around my farm, yes, I will pick them up and put them into my greenhouse. So you can encourage certain bugs to hang out in your greenhouse. I also have a lot of spiders that are up at the tops of my greenhouse because they'll be catching flies and things like that. So it's always good to encourage good bugs in your greenhouse. If you have good bugs, you cannot then spray with toxic chemicals, because then they will also kill the beneficial bugs that you put in. So you'd have to find another way to treat the pests if you don't want to kill your good bugs that are in there. Physical barriers. So creative ways to house your system, okay? So this is the same system you guys are getting, but without the aquaponics added on, okay? So yet again, you can make your own little hoop house. Okay, so shade cloth is a very easy thing to use, but be careful of the concentration. 30%, 60%, 70%. How much light are you blocking out? Because if you block out too much light, there will not be enough light for the plant to grow, okay? So we're not looking at 100% shade cloth. At that point, you could as well have put on a roof. Okay, it's not gonna let enough light out. You'd have to then be looking at grow lights for your system. Okay, we talked about this a little bit too. Sanitation. Where are the pests coming from? Okay, around something we're bringing in. Okay, pests don't just magically turn up on your system. They have to get there from somewhere. Okay, so either you let them be in the environment and they're coming up the stand legs, they're flying in, or maybe you're bringing something into your farm, okay? Whether it could be the same seedlings that you're buying from somebody, could be the same potting mix if you don't pay attention, if it's not done by a good company. Could even be equipment, okay? Borrowing equipment from somebody else's location. So be careful when you bring in things. So always check your plant materials that are coming in. Also, just clean, sanitize, wash something before you use it, okay? Remove as much of your debris, reduce your weeds, and obviously try to reduce garbage and hot spots, okay? But like I said, we're looking for clean within our management plan. We know the problem of raising plants in a bubble, of over sanitizing as well, okay? So what is our threshold? What are we willing to budge on? What are we willing that we cannot budge on? We have to do it this level, okay? Pesticides, as I said before, don't come with this attitude, I'm never gonna use a pesticide in my life. That's not true. Famous last words, okay? You're always going to be in a battle as a farmer with the pests. You have some of the healthiest tasting, pretty plants. That is a pest's dream. They are going to come, okay? So you're gonna have to do some kind of pesticide management. Does not necessarily mean you'll be spraying, but you have to use something to control it, okay? So yet again, it's education. We're not promoting to people that organic means no pesticide. That is not true. People are under this misconception that organic means no pesticide. Organic means using safe and sustainable pesticide tools. Okay, because it's still a pesticide, whether it's soap, oil, neem oil, it is still a pesticide, okay? So, yet again, this is what we're focusing on, the toxicity, what are we controlling, also what happens when we use it, are we polluting the environment after we dispose of it, and obviously how it acts, okay? Hydroponic plants are the same as land plants, okay? So look at people who have knowledge of land plants. You have people that have been gardening in the soil. Do not discredit their knowledge just because you're doing hydroponics. What happened to basil is still the same basil that was planted in soil traditionally, okay? So all the knowledge that farmers do have of pests, fertilizer needs, climate needs, all that kind of stuff applies to hydroponic plants. So you have to take the knowledge and understand now how does it fit in when we're feeding nutrients through water instead of through soil, okay? But the same pests, the aphid is the same aphid, whether it's attacking the soil plant or the hydroponic plant. It's not a hydroponic aphid, okay? So don't get into fights with your plant people. Your plant people could become your traditional gardeners, a good resource for you, okay? They have the knowledge on these plants, please use them, okay? However, the argument you're going to get is the knowledge of water. So for example, a soil person might be able to put something in because they don't have a water catchment that is recirculating around. Okay, they don't have to worry that when they add something, it's changing the pH of the water or it's changing this or doing that. So keep in mind that when they give you a recommendation, always good to see how does that recommendation fit in with the hydroponic system, okay? And we mentioned this before, over-sanitation could lead to immunity problems, could actually lead to worse disease outbreaks. So yet again, are we moving to container farming or are we moving to controlled greenhouses that's still exposed to the atmosphere sometimes? Okay, so they're seeing pros and cons of the types of technology that we're using. Okay, I mentioned these as well earlier. These examples of what you can use. It does not have to be pure neem oil. Some of you have neem trees and are able to get neem oil. If you don't want to go through the stress of making your own neem oil, just buy it, okay? However, this could also become somebody's business. Okay, I keep telling people you need support. So just because you're pushing hydroponics, don't just push the farmers, push all the support services. Okay, someone that's going to provide seedlings, someone that's going to provide importing of nutrients, someone that's going to provide pesticides, someone that's going to provide packaging, whatever it is that you guys need to get hydroponics. When you're talking to your children, your students, it's not just about, okay, get into hydroponics. Look at all the other things that is needed as a business to support farming and hydroponics. All the challenges y'all are having right now. You want a pure, safe soap, okay? Preferably not with a colorant added. Okay, so just a simple, like the Dove soaps or the Ivory soaps, they're just the clear ones, okay? Or, you want to run around, just buy the brand that says they've done the running around for you. There's nothing in there that's going to kill the plant, okay? So yes, they're good and bad soaps. Now, I actually have also done it by test. I know that there's some brands you could get away with, and the one I find you get away with is dishwashing liquid, okay? Because usually it has in the least amount of added chemicals. But obviously, you don't need the lemon-scented floral bouquet dishwashing soap. You just want a plain dishwashing soap, one of the least amount of additives, and then you'll be able to use that. But yet again, you know, as trial and error, which brand did you use? Keep a record, because one time you might switch brands, and you realize I burn up all my plants, okay? So figure out which is the best one. Now, these are also some homemade sprays. Okay, so you can make your own soap spray. You can add things into it. You can add in oil, vegetable oil, garlic, pepper. We discussed all of these, okay? So plenty of homemade recipes. Have fun with these. Like I said, don't put them in your eyes, but, you know, there's lots of different things you can share, but these are pretty effective. Nicotine spray is another one that's been used, which is tobacco. Okay? There are lots of things on the market, lots of organic sprays. So just because somebody says it is organic doesn't mean it is organic. Do your research. If the package is telling you, you must wear gloves, you must wear a mask, do not come into contact with skin, blah, 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 lots of hazards, it is probably not organic, okay? But it has passed organic in the US, so don't take everything literal, okay? So I prefer not to use them, okay, to be honest with you. I much prefer integrated pest management and dealing with things that I know are safe, okay? But these have been used a lot in the industry, especially by commercial farms, okay? So use it with a pinch of salt. Now, when do you think I might say use this? Even me as a hater of it, when might I say use it? When you're trying to eradicate. So you said you've had a complete maybe infestation, your whole greenhouse is compromised, you're a commercial farmer. All right, nip it in the bud. Let's do it. Is it one time we're not harvesting those plants, we're making sure our staff are dressed appropriately. When we have got rid of the bug, we can sanitize, wash, and go again. If you find that yourself, you're spraying 9, 10, 15 times, what is the problem? Okay, because the spray, if you need to use spray that often, you're doing something wrong within your entire system. Try to fix that problem first before you rely on spraying constantly. So I'm not saying you can't ever use this. I'm not going to say that you can get in my bad books if I hear that you spray with dipel. But keep in mind what these chemicals do, okay? And you do not want to be a farm that is reliant on a toxic spray, okay, in the long term. But yes, it can have its uses if you have a really bad outbreak. Okay, so it said spraying with dipel. Okay, so intercropping is basically when you put a little bit of safety nets in place. Okay, if you have only one crop and something comes in and attacks that one crop, you have nothing to sell, okay? Intercropping allows you to have a few eggs in your basket of different things, so have a few different baskets, but it also may slow the spread of pests. Because say, for example, I want to grow arugula, and I know that the aphids love to come for arugula. If I put the arugula all in one section next to each other, the pest is just going to hop from plant to plant to plant. But if I put half here, and I put it basil next, and they don't like basil, and then I put the other half down there, at least if I lose that half, I don't lose the other half, okay? So there's a reason why people try to plant in grids, not necessarily the length. So remember I asked you how we planted? Okay, I didn't tell them to go straight down the line. I said plant in the 8 pipes in a grid. And then you might plant some here and some down here, okay? Put the basil. Basil is really good at repelling pests. Put basil in between. Also things like basil, bunching onions is one too, chives. Things that smell. Pests are attracted to smells, okay? So if they cannot smell the plant, all they smell is basil, they're not coming. Okay, you're hiding your other pretty crop in between the stuff that smells. Marigold is a good one too, okay? So if you can put marigolds around the perimeter of your system, pests on the outside are not gonna come in because they're just gonna see marigold and they're gonna say, all right, this is not a place for us, and they're gonna turn around, okay? So we've got many options to intercrop, okay? So we have the spreading of pests, it's gonna be harder. We also have a backup in case one crop fails. Okay, so intercropping, I don't need to go through it really. Google it. Okay, they will tell you which ones can work with which ones. Some plants do not like each other. Okay, they release different chemicals or compounds that interfere with the absorption of nutrients. So this is telling me already, I can't plant carrot next to dill. Okay? I should not put corn next to tomato. Okay, so some of these don't apply for aquaponics, but you can go online if you want to grow basil, for example, and say, what can I not plant next to basil? See what comes up, okay? So you'll learn too, and this is where your record keeping helps, because if you found like, oh, when I put the mint here, everything did well, but when I put the mint on this section, everything did poorly. Why I say mint? Because mint is one of those plants that can take over your system. Okay, and when they take over, they can send roots all up under the other plants and steal all the nutrients. So I tend to put mint at the back of the system. So the nutrients go through all the other plants first and hits the mint last. Okay, so make sure that you don't put a hungry plant at the top of your system, that none is starving out everybody below. Okay, so it's more companion. Okay, then we go into spacing. So yet again, hydroponics, we have compacted the growing area. We're getting more efficiency. Plants are growing quite close to each other, 6 inches apart usually, okay? But be sensible, okay? If you plant it too close, you're gonna get problems. There's only so much bunching you can do before you get problems. And then we talked about airflow, we talked about temperature. So you might be able to bunch them together in the cooler months, but what happens in the summer? Maybe we don't do as much bunching, okay? Make sure too that they get light, because if you have like a really big pepper or basil next to your lettuce, is that plant shading the other plant too much, blocking the light, okay? And obviously if your plant is fruiting, it's like a tomato vine or something like that, you gotta give it the space to grow, okay? So where is it going? What's your plan? Is you're gonna tie up the vine to a rafter, you're gonna build a little support for it, you're gonna let it go on to the ground, okay? But you can't just leave it on the system to lie down and squash everybody else. Don't try to come and say now, you can get them at 3, okay? Try to trust what most of the experts are telling you. They also will tell you based on your climate, your area, types of plants. So things like chives, which are skinnier plants, can go down to 4 inches. Seedlings or younger lettuces could be going at 4 inches, but when they get bigger, you might need to move them over to 6-inch spacing. Bigger plants might need up to 12, okay? So yet again, deciding on your spacing is part of your design, but the majority need about 6. So the average system will do 6-inch spacing because then you can grow most things on it. Okay, but if you were adding on, you might decide, well, I can do this first system at 6-inch, my second system at 4-inch spacing, and my third system at 12, and then I can cater it to certain crops. Okay. Obviously, you can also train your plants to grow. So obviously, if it's a tomato, just the root has to be in the water. You can then send the vine wherever you want it to go. Cut the leaves, train the vine to go where you want it, okay? So overcrowding plants. So basically stunted growth, lower yields, increased disease risk. So yet again, why are you doing this, okay? So people come with this view, oh, well, I have a 300-hole system, but I should now make it a 600-hole system. But what if you do that and now you have 10 plants surviving? Did that make sense? Should you not have just focused on the 300 doing well, okay? So a lot of farmers try to say, well, I spent all this money, so I got to get the maximum amount of plants out, and they push in too much plants, and then they end up with problems, okay? So just because you have a 300-hole system doesn't always mean you're going to get 300 plants. If it makes more sense to space out the plants, and you're going to get 200 that do well, that is better than 300 that do poorly. So make your choices on what you're putting in, where you're putting them in. Obviously, you can stagger. So in your cases, we are planting all the holes one time. Okay, but you could also plant half, and exactly have certain seedlings coming in here, and then younger ones there, and older ones there. Okay, but that becomes a little problematic with nutrient balance, okay? So usually if you do a batch, you know, well, the nutrients for that batch are fine. But then when you get into level technique, as I was saying, technique 2, you can maybe alter your nutrients to suit what plants are in the system.